And there was a time when people would go, "Oh, World War II, it is so over." And I felt that too a bit. And I thought, nobody's going to read about this. But actually, what you really discover about World War II is that its ramifications are so long lasting. And I mean, you only have to look at the Middle East today, for example, that you see, or indeed Putin talking about Nazis, you see the deep and profound effects that that war had. I was genuinely thinking, I will never write another book. And I remember actually one day just sitting out in the car and thinking, okay, I might never write another novel. And just feeling like half my life had disappeared. It was a kind of, I remember the moment so clearly. He is not what he seems. I thought, wouldn't it be fun to have a cozy crime novelist who's murdered, and it turns out he's not as cozy as he seems.
Hello and welcome to How to Have Extraordinary Relationships, the podcast where we ask people to come on and tell us all about their relationships or whatever it is they want to talk about. Today, I'm thrilled to be with a novelist, writer, journalist, and all-round brilliant person, Thynne, who's going to talk to us about many things. So just to let you all know, your book that's about to come out has been made the Hatchard's Book of the Year. I've just seen it on Instagram.
Book of the month.
A Book of the Month, Appointment in Paris. So this is wonderful. You've written so many books, and I'm just going to do a quick sort of, for me, what binds them together for me, you've got Nazis. You've got the Mitford sisters. These are in throughout lots of the books. You've got Eva Braun. You've got Hitler. You've got Magda Goebbels, Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Edward the whatever he was, Mr. Simpson, Edward the Eighth. Paris, Vienna, love, espionage, people with dual nationalities. Lots of moving in and out, and we've romance and love. I mean, they've literally got everything, your books.
Yeah. Sex and spies. Yes, I know.
Sex and spies. You're like Ben McIntyre, but with sex. Not that I've talked about Ben McIntyre personally, but please tell me they're all being made into best-selling things for Apple TV. Please tell me this. They're brilliant.
In my dreams, they've been
obviously should be. They're like Strike, but better.
Quite a few of them have been optioned, but the odds against anything actually making it onto the screen are so enormous. But one lives in hope, and the more books you turn out, I suppose the higher the odds are. But really also, it's about writing a kind of very filmic or televisual book, and if you want it to be made into a film, and that so you need a tight time frame, and you need to focus on just a few key characters. And I often think my novels are maybe move around quite a lot, but
it'd be expensive but you do CGI Berlin. So anyway, they're great. I think they're completely cinematic. So I think if anyone's out there wants to, you're missing a trick if you don't do it, because they've got everything. So, and
I very much think, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut across. I mean, I very much think people are still interested in this period. And there was a time when people would go, "Oh, World War II, it is so over." And I felt that too a bit. And I thought, nobody's going to read about this. But actually, what you really discover about World War II is that its ramifications are so long lasting. And I mean, you only have to look at the Middle East today, for example, that you see, or indeed Putin talking about Nazis, you see the deep and profound effects that that war had. A bit like the Trojan War that people still talk about 1,000 years hence. It was such a seismic experience and event that I think it's really, there's so much about it that we haven't really looked at and studied, and that people are still interested in, particularly for me, the characters. And that's why I wrote a lot initially about Nazi women.
Yes, I'm interested in that, because they don't really get written about.
Exactly.
Or if they do, I haven't read that much about them. So what was interesting to you about people like the Nazi women? I mean, they are fascinating, aren't they?
Well, I just thought, and what I thought initially was the only thing I know about the Nazi period is about the men, about Hitler and Goering and
Goebbels and
Goebbels
Hess
and
and
Hess. I know about the men. I've heard about the battles and the politics. I don't know anything about the other half of that particular regime or about what it was like to live in Germany during the war. And I became very, very interested. It was about the time that Bashar al-Assad's wife, Asma, moved to Syria with Bashar al-Assad, and he became the dictator of Syria, and she became well, she went along with his rule. And I was very interested in this because she'd been a really ordinary English girl, gone to school in London, grown up, reading Tatler, etc. What is it like to suddenly find yourself sort of steeped in blood? And do you, at that point, say to your husband, look, we can't go on like this? Or do you just go along with it? And so I thought, I wonder what all the Nazi wives, how it was for them. And so I set about finding out.
yeah.
And each of the Clara Vine novels
Mm,
features
mm.
a different Nazi wife. So they all reacted differently.
So, how did you find out? I mean, obviously they're fiction, okay, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because you're dealing with people who we, the reader, intrinsically hate.
Magda Goebbels, the wife of Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister, was known as the devil woman, even still is known as the Teufelfrau, devil woman, because she committed suicide, but she killed her
Yeah.
six of her children before she did.
Yeah.
And in the bunker in 1945. And so this is considered, absolutely heinous. She is detested. So how did I find out? Well, and that's the other interesting thing is they're not written about very much. And so you have to go to letters and biographies. And what interested me about Magda was that she had this amazing personal story, this astonishing story. She'd grown up with a Jewish stepfather in a very affluent household, and she'd met a young Zionist called Chaim Alosarov
Oh,
and became his girlfriend and learned Hebrew and wore a Star of David. And Alosarov wanted to go to Palestine, which was then a British mandate, and found a state of Israel. And she decided she'd stay in Berlin, and off he went. And while she was in Berlin, she went to a talk by a sort of some guy called Hitler. And she went along to this talk and became completely infatuated with Hitler as a
mm.
result of this. And Hitler pretty much, found her very attractive too, but decided to introduce her to Joseph Goebbels because Hitler couldn't marry. So Joseph Goebbels proposed to her, Magda accepted, and so they got married in 1931. 1933, her erstwhile boyfriend comes back to Berlin, walks down the road, looks in a bookshop window and sees a wedding photo of Magda with Joseph Goebbels, the arch enemy of the Jews, and as best man, pretty much Voldemort, Hitler.
Oh my God.
And he is so horrified that he decides to go to Magda to speak to her. So we don't know, at that point, we don't know anything more about what passed between them, except for the fact that he was murdered 3 months later. And I thought this is so extraordinary to go from being a kind of devoted Zionist to a married to a major Nazi that I was desperate to find out and imagine what it would have been like. And so that's where I first envisaged Clara Vine. I thought, if you had a go-between, a fictional go-between between these two, you could expand that story a bit more. So that's where Clara was, first envisaged. And then I wrote another 6 books, in
Yes.
she lives in Berlin and has various experiences.
So, I mean, what do you feel when you're writing about these people? do they become part of you? Do you
Oh, so much, so
yeah.
much.
I mean, even with the Mitfords, I know Unity and Diana, and then there may be people who are listening know a little bit about them, or anyone that's listened to The Rest is History. There's lots about all of this on The Rest is History, but you're bringing in all these people, aren't you? I mean, I imagine they become.
Well, I mean, so your protagonist becomes part of you, but I mean, yeah, I wouldn't want to say Unity Mitford
Oh
was
no,
part
no,
of me in any way, but it was very, in the second Clara Vine, The Winter Garden, Goering used to had a sort of baronial hunting lodge called Carey, and there's a scene in which Clara has to go to a dinner there and Unity Mitford's there, and it's all based on, I mean, all these things actually happened. You know, I was kind of very careful with dates and things and events. I didn't want to put people in a place they weren't. And so she goes along, and there's Unity kind of just being mad, actually. So they do become part of you, and indeed, it's sort of difficult when you have to move to a different protagonist, but then that different protagonist also becomes very much part of your kind of thinking. You're thinking about it all the time. And so the current series I'm writing, the new book, Appointment in Paris, features two characters, Stella Fry, who's English, but has spent a lot of time on the continent. And she was a tutor to a Jewish family in Vienna. She's come back because, you know, war is imminent and she hasn't got a job. And by some chance, she meets a disgraced ex-MI5 investigator called Harry Fox, and they become an unlikely duo. So indeed, Stella and Harry also now kind of, you know, enter my thinking a lot.
So, I mean, you've written loads of books now. I mean, I was looking. I mean, it's like you can't. I mean, it's not. You don't just write under your own name. I mean,
no, that was so. I'll tell you. So I've written under a pen name, which is C.J. Carey, because I decided to write a book that was not. There was an alternative history, and because I'd always been really, really careful about dates, and you've got to get the history right on this because it's the Second World War. It's important. If I was writing an alternative history, I wasn't going to be paying attention to kind of that kind of fidelity to fact. So I thought I'll write it under a different name. And I wrote a book called Widowland. And it came about because I had my husband, Philip Kerr, had just died. And I'd gone out with, actually, I'm sure somebody, you know, a friend from the Telegraph. Actually, I'm not going to name him here, but anyhow, we had a lunch. He's great. He said, look, I'm really sorry, but we'd love to invite you to dinner. And I said, oh, that'd be fantastic. When? And he said, except we only have couples to dinner. And I went home. He meant it well. He just was a bloke, you know. I went home and I thought, oh, I'm living in Widowland now.
yeah.
And even as I thought that, I then was thinking of something I've been researching about the end of World War II and how women still in Germany were divided for their rations according to how much they should be allowed. And the women at the bottom of the heap were women who were over 50 and didn't have children or a man. And they were called Friedhofsfrauen, which means cemetery women, because they were useless. And so they had the least food. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be interesting if you had that kind of ranking system, if Britain and Germany had never gone to war, and you had a system in which women were in these castes. And so I started writing Widowland, and it was a very interesting thing I'd been fascinated by, which was that there was a man called Alfred Rosenberg, who was Hitler's philosopher friend, who had decided that he would rewrite history, and he'd captured all and gone through libraries and houses in occupied Europe, taking history books out and putting scholars in charge of rewriting the history so that the history agreed with National Socialist ideas.
Yeah.
I thought, wouldn't that be interesting if you did the same with English literature? So you like had a Pride and Prejudice or Middlemarch or Jane Eyre, and instead of having like feisty, independent women of the 19th century finding their own agency, you had women learning to respect and obey men more, and basically not thinking that they could be more intelligent in any way. So my protagonist in Widowland, Rose, this is her job, dumbing down English literature, and it was a joy to write that book. It was an absolute joy because I was so interested in current themes of changing literature and what you couldn't write about, and these ideas of cultural appropriation and things, that it was just a pleasure to funnel it all into a thriller. So that was fun. But I wrote it under a different name, and I'm shortly going to write another C.J. Carey as well, because I've had another idea. So yes, yeah.
I mean, so I'd like to talk about Philip in a bit, but I mean, there was a period of time when you didn't write novels. I think I'm right in saying that. You were a journalist, weren't you? And then you started novels, and I think you stopped for a while.
Yeah. Hello, Children.
Oh yes, it's Hello Children. Okay. Yeah.
I'm always in awe of people that really manage to write through children. But
Yeah.
I honestly, I think I definitely conform to quite a common template, which is that women sort of just basically stop being able to produce as much because I've got 3 children. And I genuinely, it just, you would know this, Lucy, you've got children. It narrows down the amount of time you get to spend alone in a desk thinking.
Yeah.
And, obviously I'm glad I've got my children. So, but I did at times really despair. And I certainly thought I'd never write another book. I wrote 2 before I had children. Then, and what made it particularly difficult was that Philip, who's just a superb writer, was, and with an amazing work ethic, was beavering away in the basement, producing a book a year, which were getting better and better. And I was I was genuinely thinking, I will never write another book. And I remember just sitting outside, actually one day, just sitting out in the car and thinking, okay, I might never write another novel. And just feeling like half of my life had disappeared. It was I remember the moment so clearly. It was like losing a limb or something. Oh, right, I'll never write again. And inevitably there were kind of children screaming in the back. But then children grow up and they go off and do their own thing. And suddenly you've got time. So I don't tell that kind of tragic little tale to suggest that there was anything wrong with the household division of labor, partly because I liked being with my children, and I really believed, and still do believe, that Philip was an absolutely brilliant writer, and I was thrilled that, apart from anything else, that he was earning money for the household writing books. So I was very keen for him to keep writing. And then, hooray, there comes a point which you come back to it. So it's a really, not really talked about that before, but this whole point about there being another act in your life is so true.
Yes.
When you're in the midst of children, it's incredibly difficult to see that, because your attention span has to dwindle so much. Also, you're having to do their homework and things. But
your little grey cells sort of don't function so well because you're busy, I don't know, watching Postman Pat or
exactly
making Teletubby toast. And it's very hard to think, I think I'll write a thriller based in Nazi Germany when you're in the middle of, singing the wheels on the bus.
Exactly that. You couldn't put it better. It's absolutely true. But I did think, as you do at points in your life, oh, this is it. I will never do this other thing that I really wanted to do. And then you do. So it's fantastic. And I just feel really pleased that I've been able to keep writing. And my children, well, 2 out of 3 of them want to write. So
oh no,
that's unfortunate. But so it's great having kids. I spread mine out over a long period as well, which sort of makes it worse. It's much more wheels on the bus,
endlessly.
per year.
Yes, you pack them in. You sort of pop them out like little peas, and hopefully you're done in the space of 5 years.
You really do, you really do. And but they're all off now doing their own thing. So you know, here's me and the dog
And
and
cat. That'll be
and cat.
so Philip, obviously, I mean, he had died at 62, you were saying. I mean, that
Yeah,
was
he
very
died in 2018 at the age of 62, which I think everybody can accept is incredibly young. And I mean, certainly now that I'm past that age, I see how young that is. And it, you know, he was really, you always want to say at your peak of your powers, but I mean, he was really, really impressively writing. And the most, literally to me, one of the most impressive things was that between the time that he knew that his cancer was, you know, basically terminal and dying, he wrote an entire novel in 7 months, just wrote a novel. Whereas most of us would be kind of, you know, well, doing an awful lot of other things, not sitting down writing another novel. But I think the reason, well, I remember saying to him, how can you do it? And he said, it's the only time I can get away and get back into my other world, which is completely comprehensible. You know, when he was writing about Bernie Gunther, his hero, he was in that world. He was in Berlin. And so I do understand that. But it was an amazing achievement. And that particular novel, which is called Metropolis, is now going to be dramatized by Apple TV. And the character of Bernie Gunther, the detective, is going to be played by Jack Lowden.
Oh, I know. Yeah, Mr.
River Cartwright in Slow Horses. So, you know, fantastic. So that's great, you know, and you know, it's just a bitter sadness that he's not a bit able to see it. So yeah.
I mean, you say you're widowed, basically relatively young, bringing up 3 children.
Yeah, I was 56. Yeah, feels young, but probably.
It is young, and you've got 3 children you're bringing up.
And what happens then? Well, I don't know about other people, but what very much happened to me is we'd always had good cop, bad cop, and I had been good cop. Suited me fine because it's less confrontational. But when Philip died, I was very conscious that actually I needed to try and be both parents, because, you know, there are 2 parts to good cop, bad cop, and one is kind of setting boundaries, and the other one is just kind of a certain amount of indulgence. And none of my kids liked my new plan. You know, they didn't like. They kept saying, "This isn't you."
They kept saying, "So you've got to be in by 10 o'clock," and they were like, "What? You can't have another drink. What?"
I was very kind of, I need to be tougher. I need to ask them more about their careers and, you know, what they're kind of what they're planning to do, exactly as Philip would have done. But ultimately that was hopeless, because I just reverted to being myself, and which is a shame, because there are points at which a bit of bad cop would have been good, but they're grown up now. I mean, my son's just had his first baby, so I don't need to do that kind of parenting anymore. But it is the sort of thing that you face if you lose your partner, is taking on that parenting role and thinking, who can I get to be the male in this situation, or if not the male, you know, the kind of other half of it.
Yes, it's hard. And then also you're dealing with your grief, and everyone's grieving.
That's the other thing. So you're very conscious that they're grieving, all in different ways, really different. But and the other thing that you want to do, which you find yourself doing, is painting the most rosy picture of, you know, your beloved husband, partner, that you possibly can, you know, because I think that's psychologically good for children to think, you know, their dad was a hero and things. And you find yourself slightly over egging the rosiness, I think, if that's not too horrible a mixed metaphor, but because you're very conscious of how they're psychologically going to cope. And I was all for kind of do see a therapist if you need to. Only one of them saw a therapist, but yeah, it's grim. Yeah, but they seem to be relatively fine now.
Yes, I mean it's hard because you're helping them, you're trying to help you. Were you writing? Had you started writing again at that point?
So I was writing a book while Philip was dying called The Words I Never Wrote.
Mm.
And I had been told by the doctor that he would incredibly, which you can now, I think some oncologists can do, she predicted the date he would die.
Great.
And I thought, I need to finish this book so that I can really be with him and, all the sort of stuff. So I remember just finishing that book and sending it off. In the frame of mind that I knew he was going to die in the next couple of days, which he did. I died the next day. That was kind of, and so that book has always been my most important book, because it holds in it all that stored emotion of what it was like with him. And but it's another world. When you're with somebody who's dying, you're in a different world. You look out the window, you see people walking down the street.
Yeah.
You can't believe they're just having a normal day, and don't they realize what's about to happen to them, and you live in that different reality for quite a while afterwards, and then gradually you rejoin the normal world and you just think about paying your taxes and going to parties and things. But it never really, obviously it changes you forever. And you can never, particularly if I think it's obviously must be appalling if you've lost a child, but when you lose your long-term husband, it's very hard, because that's half of you've lost. And also because that life ends, you've watched it end in front of you, and so yeah, it does definitely change you.
Yes, it does. I remember driving up when the day my father was dying, and we knew he was dying, and thinking I'll never drive up the M4 feeling this way ever again. From tomorrow, everything in life will be different.
Yeah.
And again, looking out of the way, I remember going, I don't know, walking out of his house, and it was like I was like, yeah, it's like you're in one world and everyone else is in a very different world.
Mm.
Extraordinary.
It is so extraordinary, but I also think the whole process made me think very differently about life and death, and I've definitely moved away from the position that I had sort of previously, which I think an awful lot of us do, which is like, oh, you're just going to you're just kind of dead matter in the ground, that's your life snuffed out, sort of thing. I'm in a different place now, although impossible to articulate very simply at the moment, so I probably won't drone on about that. But it just changes you so much. And Philip was incredibly brave over the matter of dying, really brave, and faced it very staunchly. So there you go. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's very difficult to know how any of us will be in that. But it's interesting that both of you writing, so your books, going back to, they go across Europe, don't they? I mean, there's Paris, and now this. Tell us about your latest book then, because obviously this
escapism. It's so blissful to range around Europe. It's so, in fact, when I'm thinking of the next book, I start with the location first. I think, where am I really interested in going and seeing and having a look at? And World War II is obviously, Europe is very, very central to World War II. So particularly Germany, I've done a huge amount of research and travel in, been to the Berghof, walked around where Hitler's home was, went up to the Eagle's Nest. Eagle's Nest was a tea house which was given to Hitler as a present for his 50th birthday, and it's on the top of a mountain in the Bavarian Alps, and Hitler hated it because he had claustrophobia, and you have to travel a mile up in a very, very small lift to get up to the top. So he hated it, hardly ever went. But Eva Braun, his ultimate wife, used to go there all the time, loved it, and took her friends up. So it was very interesting walking around there. The interesting thing about so much of Germany, well, particularly Munich, is you can walk around, you can see things exactly as they would have been, and you can see swastikas on the lintels still of houses, and you can look up, you can go to the beer cellar and look up, and you can see the swastika entwined in the flowers on the ceiling, painted. And the difference between southern Germany and Berlin. So Berlin is all about, we want to talk about World War II. Here's a memorial. Here's a kind of, here's a little plaque. But so much of it was decimated. Whereas you go down to Munich, which was also much of it destroyed, but you can absolutely go into the Hofgarten and things. Very interesting. So, so Germany's interesting. France, obviously. So I thought I wanted to set something in Paris. And I thought it would be exciting to do something just coming up to the 10th of May, 1940, when the German army began their huge blitzkrieg into first of all Belgium and Holland and then France. What would it be like if you knew that the German army are on their way? And more important, in London,
yes,
what would it be like? You firmly believed, and a huge number of people firmly believed, that they were going to be invaded, and that because literally a hair's breadth away across the channel, people were being invaded, and the German army was there. And I thought it's very interesting now, living in Europe, when you've got a war happening, albeit a bit further away. But just to enter into that mental space of what actually would it be like if we were about to be invaded. And so both Stella and Harry are kind of like having to think about this, and Stella goes to Paris and is actually there when the invasion begins. And so I was examined what it was like in Paris on that morning when they hear on the BBC or on the news that the Wehrmacht are on their way. And that air in Britain. So it wasn't like, oh, we'll be fine, we've got the Royal Air Force, and we'll be fine. Nobody felt that. People thought, it's coming down the line, and we might be able to fight them off, as Churchill famously says, fight them on the beaches, fight them on the landing stages, we will never, but he meant it, we are going to be standing there on the beaches. And then by sheer fortitude and good fortune, it didn't happen. So we didn't have to face that. But
was that, do you think, because the Americans joined the war? I know you're not a military historian.
No, it isn't. No. So the Americans didn't come into the war till December 1941, when Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese, and that was when they entered World War II. But what happened in England was that first there was the Battle of Britain. I mean, this was effectively what happened, was that our Spitfires and our kind of super brave young men in the Battle of Britain managed to fight an air war in summer 1940 to actually, which stopped the Luftwaffe in their tracks. And at that point, they decided to call off the invasion plans and turn their attention to, really, then they started looking at the Eastern Front and started thinking about invading Russia. But very stupid. But so the Battle of Britain, never in the field of conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. That saved our bacon in a huge way.
It's very moving, isn't it? I mean, when you leave your books, when you finish your books, you think, oh, I'm just aching to get back in that. I'm just aching to get back.
So the one I'm writing now, the next one, is a standalone, and it's set half in, nearly all in Long Island in 1953, and partly at the Nuremberg war trials. which I'm hoping it's going to be the first novel that ever is set both in the socialite jet-setting environs of Long Island and also the Nuremberg war trials. But I'm just kind of super interested in both those things. So I've just come back from Long Island, where I was researching the place that, in fact, Scott Fitzgerald imagined for the Great Gatsby would have lived. You know, these great mansions across the Gold Coast of Long Island. So it was really interesting.
So fascinating. I mean, it feels that you love doing the history, the places, and then you get a cracking story on top with your wonderful characters, your heroes and heroines, or your, I don't know if you want to call them, but they.
Well, espionage is, in a way, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, there's still so, interesting things coming up every day out of our espionage history. And I've got a theory about why espionage novels have become more popular, which I think is because we live in a surveillance society. If you walk down whichever high street you're in, you in Henley, wherever you are.
Yeah.
There's going to be CCTV cameras looking at you.
I think the whole funny thing about Henley is someone got a tat on Halloween with some teenagers who were pelting him with walnut whips. No, I know. And then he said, "I want to see the CCTV camera." And none of the cameras had
them
were on because no one the family could afford to run them. So,
okay, well, if you walk around where I live in Wimbledon, there's a lot of them, and I think that as a result, we've all developed this a sort of sense of hypervigilance, that we know we're being watched all the time, and that is what happens in espionage. That feeling of observing and being observed, which would have been alien to, say 200 years ago. You could go about your business and you could go to places where you were private and you knew nobody'd be looking at you. But now you've got this sense all the time. Your phone keeps telling you things that you've just been talking about.
Yeah, it does constantly.
And I think that's made us more interested in spying, in the spy sector. And I'm really interested in espionage, and so there's an espionage theme in all my novels for that reason.
Yes. Also, it means that people can be not quite what they seem. So I like the fact that they're actors, because I imagine, yes, that works well.
Of course, because you want to study the layers of people, so people present as something that they aren't, and so you hope. So in Midnight in Vienna, which was the first in the series before Appointment in Paris, set in 1938, I had the key character in that is a detective novelist. And he's a cozy detective novelist because that was the time, 1938, the apogee of cozy crime was huge, because everybody was very worried about the future war. So everybody was.
They wanted sort of nice things.
Absolutely. So he is not what he seems. I thought, wouldn't it be fun to have a cozy crime novelist who's murdered, and it turns out he's not as cozy as he seems. So the whole thing about spying is it peels, you've got one person behind another person. And I think I've always been so interested in the figure of Kim Philby, who was this member of the Cambridge Five spies, for anyone that doesn't know, but a seminal character, baddie, who set back British intelligence a huge way by being a Soviet agent. And but it was incredibly hard to catch him, because he was such a clever spy, and he fooled everybody for a long, long time. So I'm sort of very interested in how people manage to, I suppose, deceive other people.
And there's also jeopardy, because there's also the will they get found out jeopardy bit. Will people realize that?
Yeah. Well, particularly in Nazi Germany. I mean, that's a more serious thing, because I've written a lot against the background of Nazi Germany. I'm always very conscious that it's no joke. If somebody finds you get tortured. It's not a sort of, it's not going to be a slap on the wrist. And so I read a lot of contemporary accounts of what it was like. I'm reading one at the moment by Jonathan Friedland called The Traitor's Circle. Got it somewhere. Which is exactly about that. Here it is. Hold it up. It's very good.
Yes,
and
yeah.
it's about what it was like to exist as a dissident in Nazi Germany, and how terrifying it was, and what happened to the many people who got betrayed. So it's a serious thing. There is jeopardy, but I mean, I think personally I'd be a terrible spy.
I was going to ask you if you approached, you went to St. Anne's, and were they approaching women? Were you going to be sort of Mata Hari?
Dying to be approached, but I'm an Aries, you know. I don't think
Oh, you're an Aries, you'd be far too feisty.
No, you've got to be Scorpio, I reckon. No, Aries can't. If you're somebody who like talks a lot and finds it hard to keep secrets, you're not spy material. So I was longing to be approached. Of course I wasn't. I did a lot of journalism instead. But I think I've got friends who were, obviously, and I'm in awe at their ability not to have their heart on their sleeve. But that's just the way I am. No, I mean, I would, yeah, if I've been approached, I've said yes instantly. Although it wouldn't be so easy. I had a very interesting conversation with somebody, and she said she'd been through all the hoops of will you be accepted into MI5, actually MI6 in her case, and etc. And you get to the final interview and you're being interviewed, and they ask you one question, which is there's only one answer to. Literally, there's only one answer. You can't give a different answer or you won't have the job. And the question is, why do you want to do this job? What do you think the answer is?
Because I want to protect my country.
Yeah, it's because I love my country. That's the only thing you can say.
Yeah,
You
if you say
cannot say
because I just fancy the whole idea of it because I like James Bond movies and I just think the whole thing's wonderful. And
that would be the bad thing. I remember when
yeah, or yeah, I mean, you know, I love foreign travel, or I
bad.
oh, you have to say I want to do it because I love my country.
Because I love my country. But I remember when Boris Johnson became prime minister and he was interviewed and somebody said, why do you want to do the job? And he said, yeah, it's true. I've given up a lot to do this job. I could have been earning a way more, you know, rumble. Now, there's only one thing you can say. If you become prime minister and somebody says, why do you want to be prime minister? You go, because I want to serve my country. There isn't any other.
Yes, but of course the clue to
you didn't give that answer. I mean, I'm amazed that ethic of, you know, public service and patriotism is kind of, you know, yikes. Anyhow.
Yes. So we're coming to the end. It's so fascinating. So these may not be questions you can answer, but having listened to a lot of rest of this history, I mean, what do you think when you're studying these women in Nazi Germany who aren't really written about? I think it's very interesting. Is there something that binds them all together? The women who marry in, I mean, is it an ideology? Is it, you know, what? Is it the belief in the fatherland? Maybe it's the same thing.
The interesting thing about the Nazi wives and the wives of the sort of like high-ranking officers is they were very different, and so you get somebody like Heydrich. Heydrich was a particularly horrible head of the security service, and his wife Lena was more Nazi than him, so she would egg him on. She was really savage. She wrote after the end of the war, she wrote autobiography called I Was Married, what's it called? My Husband, the War Criminal, I think that's what it's called, which wasn't ironic.
Right.
You know, she never recanted. Whereas you get some people like the wife of Hermann Goering. She was the second wife, Emmy. Yes. She was an actress who had the bad luck to be acting in a play, and he went to see it, and took her out and eventually proposed. And she was not, a lot of her friends were Jewish, and and she was not an ardent Nazi. And she had this very interesting thing, is that when her friends were threatened, she would get in contact with Hermann Goering's brother, Albert. And Albert lived in Vienna at the time, and he would help the Jewish friends of Emmy escape. And he was not an ardent Nazi either. And at the end of the war, when the Americans captured Albert and they thought, we've got this huge prize, the brother of Hermann Goering, kept some addresses of some of the Jewish people he'd helped. And he said, please just contact these people, which they did. And all the people said, he helped us escape. He was, he saved our lives. And he is now commemorated as righteous among the nations. That's Hermann Goering's brother. So that was kind of, so they were all different. Magda Goebbels, kind of like absolutely a bag of nerves, horrible life. Married to Joseph Goebbels, who was a womanizer. He was in charge of all the film and TV and cinema, not much TV, but cinema, and always womanizing. And she was, so she had horrible times. So what draws them together? There isn't a single identifiable line. They all acted differently. Eva Braun, who was married to Hitler for one day in the bunker, was a very modern character, actually, way younger than him, got picked up by him when she was 17 and he was 40. He kept her dangling. She was infatuated. He bought her a camera. The reason that we have lots of pictures of Hitler's social circle is that she was a dead keen amateur camera person and took lots of film. And so when we're looking at pictures of them, we can see, they're all been taken by Eva Braun. But so they're all different. But I just wanted, to look at their motivations as well.
Yes, because the question we all ask ourselves about any of this stuff is how on earth does this stuff happen? Because we sort of want to, I don't know, have some answer so that it doesn't happen again. So one answer. I'm sure there isn't one answer, which is how.
There is one answer, but one very important thing, which happened in Germany, was that you had a concentration of the media under the regime. Immediately took control of all the media, all the newspapers, all the radio. You weren't allowed to listen or see anything else. They burnt books, as we all know. So if you can inculcate just a single narrative in people, and you don't give them any alternative to think any other way or find opposing opinions, then they become much, much more malleable. And I think that the place of media and reading, that's why I'm absolutely obsessed with the importance of not closing down opinion, not, when people don't adhere to groupthink, not immediately stigmatizing them and closing them down, because what we really need is for people to be able to think of different ideas and talk about them and test them, not just adhere to one given idea because they think that's the right idea. And that's, unfortunately, I think what we're seeing a lot in universities is, if anyone thinks anything different, they're immediately stigmatized. But so the impact of the media, that was really, you can't underestimate it as far as the population goes.
Yes.
But also, I mean, control of, more sort of warlike things, armaments, control of raw materials, these things are obviously essential. But and above all, the great man theory of history. There's two different theories of history. One that, as Marx would say, it's about tides of, it's about tides of economic cycles. And one, which is the great man theory of history, which is that you get particular individuals who are unlike anyone else, and they affect history. So if you look today at Trump, That's a very good example. I'm not saying he's a great man. I'm saying
but it falls into the
you couldn't
investment
predict it.
theory.
You couldn't have
Yeah,
predicted him, and
yeah,
the impact he's having is seismic.
yeah.
You know, Winston Churchill, you know, great man. And then Hitler, obviously not a great man, but you
Stalin,
wouldn't have expected a Hitler.
Gandhi.
Yeah, Stalin and Gandhi, they're kind of exactly, they're people that you couldn't expect and who acted beyond what you might think. And they alter the course of events. So I think that's another way that, you know, I mean, actually, the question you just asked, Lucy, is the question that has just literally occupied everybody for 80 years. You know, how did it happen? Could it happen again? And in so many different dimensions. So I look like the worm's eye view, look at people's marriages. What is it about their marriages that made the people the way they were? And then you can just look at other bigger political things.
Yeah, so you can take the macro and reduce it down to the micro, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you an amazing. If you got time, you got a minute more.
Yes.
Okay. So here's I think a very good example. So we mentioned Magda Goebbels, and she was very unhappily married to this awful womanizer. And in eventually, in the course of his work, he met an actress he really fell in love with called Lida Barova, who was Czech. He was very obsessed with her and in love with her. And he did lots of pathetic things like wearing a different colored handkerchief so that when she looked at the screen in the cinema, she could see that, you know, or ringing her up just so he could hear her breathe down the phone. He was obsessed. And he had 5 children by that stage, and they all lived together with Magda, and they were called the first family of the Reich. And they're always in the papers, you know, and the magazines. And he wanted her to move in with his family because there was a kind of Nazi theory that if you were an important man, you deserved 2 wives. And he thought that would be a good idea. And so he would go on and on and on to Magda about, Lida has to move in with us. I'm a great man. I deserve two wives. And Magda said, no, I'm not having her in this house. No, you know, and he on and on and on. And we know this because he wrote diaries. He wrote diaries, which we still have. Anyhow, eventually, 1936, she gives in. She says, oh, all right, she can move in. She can move in. And so Lida turns up, and Magda takes a look at her, and the whole thing lasts one day because she's got this enormous diamond ring, which is identical to the enormous diamond ring he's just given Magda to kind of, as a thank you for the ménage à trois. So Magda goes to Hitler and says, I cannot stand it anymore and I want to get a divorce. And Hitler goes berserk and says, no, you were the first family of the Reich. You're all over the newsstands, children dressed in little white smocks. There's no way you're getting divorced. I'm banishing Lida. What's more, you now have to do loads of stuff about how you've got a happy marriage. Then he calls in Goebbels and bawls him out, and Goebbels cries as he records it. And Goebbels is distraught because he loves Hitler more than anything. Every night in his diary, he worries away at the injustice of it and how he can get back into Hitler's favor until he comes across a plan that it's not enacted till November 1938, and Goebbels thinks this is a fantastic plan and Hitler's going to love him for this. And the plan is Kristallnacht, which is the night of broken glass, in which thousands of synagogues are burnt to the ground across Germany. People are arrested, killed, and it's mayhem. And Goebbels is expecting congratulations for this. Hitler's actually angry because what Kristallnacht did was it showed to America particularly, who had wanted to hope that Nazi Germany wasn't that bad, that actually it really was. And so it turned the eyes of the world onto Nazi Germany in a terrible way. And had, you know, Hitler and Goering both were just angry about it. And Goebbels had made everything worse. So that's a good example to me of the personal becoming political, that you have this tiny thing about, you know, being infatuated with an actress, and it ends up with thousands of people dying and the whole geopolitics shifting on its axis. So that's, I just think that's so interesting, you know.
It's fascinating. Fascinating. That he tries to get back into Hitler's favor. By doing so, completely messes it up, because everyone's hoping that really they're okay. Yeah. We'll end on that, because we could talk about this for hours. I know they had sort of show camps, so they'd let the Red Cross come and look, and they'd sort of feed the Lithuanians and make them all look healthy and happy, you know.
It's,
and then you get into what we do and don't want to believe, and what action we do or don't want to take. It's really interesting, isn't it? Well, I mean, there's stuff going on now. I won't go into that, but what action do we, and don't, you know, do we want to get involved? Do we not want to get involved? It's really interesting.
Absolutely. And what we believe history is, you know, that's a huge theme for me. What the truth of history, what we can rely on, people who've rewritten history, you know. And of course, I suppose as a historical fiction writer, you're slightly rewriting history as well. So, but that's an even bigger issue for us nowadays with AI. I mean, where you just have to assume things are wrong, you know. So I think we're in uncharted territory here. But it doesn't stop it being fun to write about. And also, realistically, escapism. I think we all need to escape into the past occasionally.
We really do. We really do. So where can people find you? Where they want to find out about you? Obviously, your books are in bookshops.
Books are in bookshops and on Amazon. And I'm
bookshops.
I'm on Facebook.
And you're on Facebook. You're on Instagram. What are you on Instagram? It's your name, isn't it? Instagram.
I think it's my name, yeah. And yeah, no, so I'm all over everywhere. But definitely, yes, go out and buy the book.
And your book is out September the
September the 4th. It's called.
Oh, it's literally now.
Yeah, it's out as we speak. It's out in 3 days, and that's going to be fun. And I also had to go to Paris to research it, so that was one of the more fun things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about the book and about how you work. It was so fascinating. Thank you so much. Very generous of you, Jane. Thank you.
Oh, well, as you and I both know, we have so much, having worked on Fleet Street together, we have so much gossip to get down to now.
I'm going to do the gossip, but unfortunately, we can't tell you all the gossip because it's probably libelous.
Almost certainly.
Thank you so much.